Well, what?
That's as loud as you could crack it. It's just a noisy whack.
That's the sleepy sign.
Welcome back to the Radical Parenting Podcast. My name is Tony Shawcross, and I'm here today with Etain O'Kane, a person that I've known for, you were there for the first Radical Honesty event that I went to in Greece with Kara Porba, who I've done a lot of these other podcast episodes with. Would you mind introducing yourself and what you do to the listeners?
Yeah, hi, I'm Etain, and I am a therapist. I live and work in Belfast in Ireland, and I've been in private practice as a therapist for about 8 years now. I'm also a Radical Honesty trainer, and I started Radical Honesty practice about 10 years ago. And I am the voice of the Radical Parenting audiobook.
Yeah, awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So where can people get the Radical Parenting audiobook? So Brad Blanton, as I've mentioned in a couple other episodes, maybe his third book or so was Radical Parenting. It was the first book of his that I was exposed to, still maybe my favorite. And so he has an audiobook version that Etain recorded. Where can people hear that? On Audible?
I'm assuming it's Audible, yeah.
Great.
I'm sure there's a link to it on the Radical Honesty page as well.
And you're also a parent, yes?
I'm also a parent, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a parent to Rory, who is 5.5.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And you co-parent with an ex, not a current partner, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Great. So again, for any of you that are tuning in for the first time, Radical Parenting podcast is largely about a philosophy around parenting that I've sometimes referred to as prime directive parenting, which is a Star Trek reference. The prime directive in Star Trek is non-interference. So it's a parenting style kind of based in having a lot of faith in your child and a lot of respect for your child's own abilities to kind of figure out their own ways. Kind of prioritizing long-term relationship and long-term psychological impact of your interactions with your child over like the immediate issues that are at hand. It's a philosophy that's also based in Brad's book, Radical Parenting. And so we've been talking to a lot of parents that believe in doing what we can to not strip away the self-expression of our kids, to not strip away any of their self-confidence, to help them trust themselves, and parents who aren't that big necessarily on like obedience and discipline and things like that. So I don't want to speak for Etain. Etain's going to talk to us today about her work as a therapist and like the importance in parenting in so many areas of processing your own issues, especially issues you developed as a child through the parenting you received, and the importance of doing that and enabling you to be the kind of parent you want to be.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the way I describe it is that I see parenting as developing a relationship. So my prime directive is, what kind of relationship do I want to have with Rory?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about, asserting my will and molding this child to be what I want. It's more, who is he and how do I relate to him?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I want that relationship to look like? And everything I do is in service to that kind of ultimate goal of having a good, healthy relationship with him.
Awesome.
And I think the reason I believe that is because I had terrible relationships with my own family. My parents were my parents were hippies, and we traveled a lot, and I was not the center of their universe. So I was an only child, and I sort of had to just go along with what was happening. And we immigrated to Canada from Belfast when I was 4, and we left my entire extended family. So it was just me and my parents. And so I was very heavily influenced by my parents' parenting, because quite often they were the only human beings I had contact with. My father really was just completely absent emotionally and physically. And my mom very much was a disciplinarian and saw me as someone that needed to do what they were told. And one of the reasons I got involved in Radical Honesty and became a therapist was to try and make sense of my childhood. And so I had lots of theory. I had lots and lots of theory. I studied child development at university, and I've read all the books about attachment theory. And, I know about how our childhood affects how we grow up and the kind of, messed up dynamics that we develop as adults. And then I had a child. And suddenly it was just brought into sharp focus that I was now taking on the role of people that I didn't learn good habits from. I didn't learn good skills from. So I had to kind of question, what kind of parent do I want to be in real time? And that's been it's been a very challenging experience, because I was an only child, so I wasn't surrounded by other children. I didn't have a large extended family. I didn't have aunties and uncles to look to as role models. So whenever I had my son, it was like, okay, how do I do this?
Mm-hmm. So
And
I don't want to sidetrack you, but I am gonna ask a few questions. Well, and first I'll mention that we're live on the radio, 92.9 FM, 89.3 HD3. You can listen online at denver.open.media. And that's an FCC we're in the United States. Etain's in Belfast. We aren't allowed to say the F word on the air.
Oh.
So I'll mute that one out, and it's no big deal, but if you can, try and avoid those ones. So that's really off topic, but back to the subject at hand. So, first, I just want to say that a lot of people think they have like a broad idea of like what kind of relationship they want with their child. But my experience is, in my relationship with my child, in my romantic relationships, even in like working, kind of all relationships, I've found that it is really helpful to just like really think about that. Like, what kind of relationship do I want to cultivate? Because a lot of my natural programming, I think of myself as a good person. A lot of my natural programming is in line with the kind of relationships I want to create. And then a lot of it isn't. A lot of my like automatic programming and upbringing and habits aren't really lined up with that. I get really caught up in some moment or some short-term kind of goal or some short-term feeling or reaction I'm having, and then behave in a way that I find is actually at odds with, if I were to sit down and think about the kind of relationship I want to cultivate with these people in my life. And so I think it's so important to do that. And so I have two questions you can answer in either order. But one is, I want to hear when you have decided, like, and for me, it helps to really simplify it, because I could have a list of like 1,000 things that are like, what kind of relationship I want with my son or with my partner or with my mom. But for me, it really helps to just like, what are the core things? Because then I can, no matter how riled up I'm getting or angry I'm getting or sad I'm getting, I can always go back to these one or two or three things. So one of my questions is going to be, what are those for you with Rory? And then another question, which maybe I'm interrupting you, we're already going to get there, is what are some of the ways you find your like knee-jerk, habits from childhood that are at odds with that?
Yeah. So I would say that the core for me is, how do I put that succinctly? So I think what's most important to me as a parent is that Rory knows that he can be himself with me, and all feelings are okay. It's okay to mess up, but also to model graciousness and repair and communication skills, to give him language for what he's experiencing, rather than trying to just stop the experience I don't like. So, if he's kicking off and he's mad at me, I'm like, okay, I can see you're mad at me. I can see that you're really frustrated that I won't let you have ice cream for breakfast. And it's still a no. And he can kick off and I'll say, okay, so, it's about having that kind of, like, he's allowed to kind of negotiate with me. He's allowed to tell me when he's frustrated or upset, or he's allowed to tell me when he's happy as well. We say love a lot. We're very affectionate. And I suppose I kind of want him to know that life is not always fair, but we work it out together. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying earlier, that sort of hands-off approach. So I've always sort of thought, okay, well, as long as nobody's going to die, as long as there's no real health and safety concerns, let him explore this. Let him trust his own instincts. And I see that as very different compared to people I see in the playground, other parents in the playground who are saying, stop that, don't do that, be careful, slow down, be quiet. There's all these, parents barking orders at their children, while I'll say things like, okay, you're up on that ledge. What happens if you slip? What's your next step? Where are you going to put your foot next? Have you thought about what you're going to do at the end of this precarious thing you're climbing on? And get him to kind of collaborate and think about things and know that risk exists. And it's okay to take risks. Mm-hmm. But to also be responsible for your own actions. I think those are the kind of the core things. And also just to have fun. Life is about not taking life too seriously.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to teach kids that usually.
Yeah. Yeah. And your second question about when am I tested in that, I think it's when the real the big challenge for me is when there is extreme anger or violence, because kids lash out, right? And particularly young children who don't have impulse control, who don't have the capacity to stop themselves from feeling huge emotions and acting those out. It has triggered me a lot. My mom was physically disciplinarian with me, and I would say abusive. So having somebody screaming and biting and kicking, I found really tough. And around the kind of 3-4 age, when they're really challenging boundaries and being really cheeky and saying no and pushing back, there's a part of me going, I would never have spoken to my parents like that. I need to control this situation. And the old script is there going, punish, assert your will, shout back and scare them. Like there's this part of me that reminds me of the way my mom treated me and absolutely horrifies me. Mm-hmm. But on some level, this is what I was talking to you before we did the call, on some level, it was healing for me to experience that experience and see how close you can get to the edge of losing your cool, how easy it is to flip into bullying, to flip into abuse. As a single parent, when you're exhausted and you have been working all day and all you want to do is sleep and your child is screeching at you, there's a part of you that's really tempted to try and control. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I can now kind of have compassion mm-hmm. for I now know what it feels like to be on the other side and to have that impulse. And I'm not going to act the same way. So on one level, it was like, I now understand how she was pushed to the edge and didn't have the skills that I have. And also, I'm really grateful for the experiences that I've had that have taught me that I don't have to react in the same way.
Yeah. So you're just saying one of the habits that you built and lessons that you learned growing up that would be kind of a knee-jerk reaction if you weren't kind of putting this prioritization of the relationship you're trying to build with Rory first, is you might just respond to kind of the to fight.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's what everything in your body is telling you to do, right?
Totally.
The instinct is there. And then there's this other part of me that I've had to cultivate for years and years and years that goes, you know better than this. There's another way.
Yeah.
Keep your cool. Model what you want him to learn. He's not going to learn it tonight. But if you keep doing it over and over again, by the time he's 6, 7, 8, 13, 25, that's his normal.
Yeah.
His normal is, you're modeling what you hope your child will receive as love and compassion and gentleness and guidance rather than punishment.
Yeah. Great. I want you to keep going with this. I'm going to share a little personal story. When I first did Landmark Education, the Landmark Forum, kind of my main takeaway was that in every moment, I want to be the source of who and how I'm being. I don't want to just be kind of a reactive, machine where someone cuts me off in traffic and then that person gets to determine who and how I'm being. I want to be the source of who and how I'm being. And so that was kind of a little bit of a mantra for me for a few weeks after Landmark. And I remember having this one instance where something happened, like in traffic, it was a cab driver. So it was back in the day when we had cabs. We still do, but not many. And the cab driver did something, cut me off or recurringly did something. And I said to myself, like, all right, no, I want to be the source of who and how I'm being, not this guy. And I was like, yeah, I want to, who and how I want to be right now is the guy who finds a brick and smashes it through this. I thought my rational brain was like, no, this is who I want to be. I want to smash his windshield or something like that. Anyway, the point of that for me is that it is in me, this reactivity and this anger is there, and it's like, yeah, it's so strong sometimes that I even get so caught up with it that even if I'm questioning myself, I'm like, no, this is the right thing to do right now. I don't ever think that anymore. I mean, I've had enough practice at it, but when that was a new idea for me, I was like, yeah, pretty much all facets of my brain are being overtaken by this anger that I'm feeling.
And
I didn't.
There
do
are
that.
times.
Never
There
have.
are times when I do lose my cool as a parent, and what I do is I'm really good at communicating that before it happens. So I'm really clear with Rory. Like, yeah, that noise is driving me crazy. If you keep doing it, I'm gonna have to either leave the room or we're gonna have to stop what we're doing. Will you please stop? And if it keeps going, there might be a time when I really lose it and go too far. And I had a situation with him just last month where it was just a really tough week. We had been in lockdown for 5 months. He's an only child as well. He hasn't been able to play with other children for a long, long time. He's kicking off. He's feeling the effects of COVID and everybody else's collective stress. And it was just being really hard work for about 2 weeks, just defiant and angry and spitting and it was tough. And there was a part of me was really being triggered by it. And there was one night it just came to a head and he kicked a ball and spilt something, and I lost it. I was so unreasonable. I was shouting. I was being really mean about it, going, you have to clean that up. And I was, really, and he started to cry and I started to cry and we cuddled each other. And I thought, okay, yeah, we're both just we're just at the edge of our ability to cope with anything right now. And that's okay too. It's okay for our kids to see us completely get it wrong.
Yeah.
And to go the next day and say, Mommy did the wrong thing. I lost my temper. It was an accident. It wasn't your fault. I'm sorry I reacted that way. I'm not going to do it again. How did it feel for you? I understand that scared you. I'm sorry. And to give him a chance to talk about it. And that's okay. In fact, I think that's really good learning for a child.
Yeah.
I don't recommend losing your cool all the time. If you are, then definitely go and get some help and support. And that's another thing that I've had to really learn as a parent. Being an only child and having, you know, a messed up situation with my folks, what I learned was to be the tough guy, right? I don't need anybody for anything. I'm very capable. I'm independent. I do my own thing. I don't need anybody for anything. And I mean, I've learned that that's a trauma response and not a good way to live your life. So I'd already been working on that. But being a parent, it really hit me like for the first time in my life, I can't do this on my own. I need to surround myself with good people, good nurturing people who build me up, who check in on me, who bring me dinner if I can't cook, who send me messages telling me I'm the best mom in the world when I'm feeling like a piece of crap. You know, like it also taught me that I needed to nurture myself in order to nurture him. So my boundaries with other humans, adult humans, are rock solid. The result of needing to take care of this person that I love more than any other human on the planet. I want to be the best version of me for him. And so I've really cultivated good relationships over the last 5 years that support me to be the best mom I can be as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure there probably are a few parents in the world who never really act out of alignment with that intention that they have of the kind of relationship they want to create, or this idea of being who and how they want to be in every moment. There probably are a few who do that, but very, very few. And I liked what you're saying too, that in order for you to maximize that, it takes self-care. It takes, in your case, I don't know if you said this or if I just know it, but therapy. It takes you kind of ongoingly dealing with those things. And if you as a parent are finding yourself flipping out quite a bit, one of the books that we read, I think Janet Lansbury, but maybe Alfie Kohn, all of them really say like, it's a good sign you're not really taking care of yourself. And part of that care too is tending to any of those wounds that you developed in your own childhood, which might not just be the kind of taking care of yourself that's like taking a walk in the morning or having alone time, but like doing some work and doing some therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I mean, I don't trust any therapist who doesn't do therapy.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a big advocate of therapy, and any time I feel myself slipping at all, or if a pattern is repeating in my life, or there's some difficulties going on in my adult relationships, I go and I sort that out. Absolutely. More parents did that, we'd have much happier kids. We wouldn't have kids then acting out.
Yeah. And I imagine some of your friends, I mean, for me at least, I do seek out therapy, professional therapy, but I also have a circle of friends that are just steeped in radical honesty and therapists in general, psychotherapists as friends. So we aren't really therapizing each other, but just the kind of communication that comes through relationships like that is healing and helps you stay in the kind of zone I want to stay in.
Right. That emotional intelligence is an absolute essential for me. Like anybody in my life who takes up any significant space has to be emotionally intelligent, has to be able to have a meaningful conversation, has to be able to express empathy and support, and also be vulnerable and admit their own failings and share those in a way that's not like, it's not gnashing of teeth. It's not like, out victiming each other. It's just sort of like, here I am, warts and all. And sometimes I'll be the one feeling great and able to support you. And then there's other times when you're going to be the one who's carrying me. And that's great. I can really trust in everybody that I have in my life. Yeah, that's really important.
Great. A couple episodes ago, Karen and I reviewed a book called Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn, and he makes up like a rule. He's like, I recommend you apologize to your child at least 3 times a week. And he admits that he's just making up this number for no reason. But yeah, I liked what you said. I mean, no parent is going to be perfect. no parent is even going to be their own version of perfect.
Mhm.
By their own standards, no parent is ever going to be perfect. That's kind of the only standard
I
that
don't
probably
want to be
matters.
perfect.
Yeah.
I don't want to be perfect.
Yeah,
No, I
good.
want to be perfectly imperfect. And I want Rory to grow up in a world where it's okay to mess up
Yeah.
and to have lots of strong, resilient skills in dealing with the imperfect.
Yeah.
That's what life is going to throw at him.
Yeah, it would be pretty shocking if you were perfect and then he has to deal with the real world and coworkers and siblings, or in this case, whatever, eventually significant others or whatever. It'd be pretty hard to handle if he had a mom
Yeah.
who never
And
flew off the
if I
handle.
could have $1 for every client that's come into my office struggling with anxiety who says, I had a perfect childhood. And then after about 3 or 4 sessions, they start talking about their childhood. And I'm like, yikes,
Yeah.
that sounds horrific. People who think they had perfect childhoods often have incredibly stilted, emotionally non-existent relationships, which were based on duty and keeping up appearances and pretending to be positive and ignoring anything negative. And they don't know how to cope with the stresses of life. Yeah. They don't know how to play. They don't know how to be silly. They don't know how to admit mistakes. They don't know how to apologize. They don't know how to ask for help.
I like to, for me, apologizing, just totally separating the two things. Because like whatever Rory did, it's kind of irrelevant. There's no reason to even talk about the kicking of the ball or spilling the thing. Like that, what you did is a separate act, and you can apologize for that in total kind of isolation,
Exactly. And it's beautiful now that he's getting a bit older and he is developing that ability to speak up for himself and to reflect on experiences. He's not so much just in the moment anymore. And he'll say to me, those were unkind words that you used. Or he'll give me feedback. and I'll be like, yeah, how could I have done that differently? What do you think? And we talk about it, and it's really lovely that he feels like he can give me feedback on what he thinks are injustices or things that I could do differently. And he'll say to me, Mommy, use your kind words, or you're being grumpy or whatever. And it's like, thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it always like, thanks for pointing that out, or is it ever something else?
Most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a pretty laid back parent, I have to say. Like I do tend to really love his company. And even in the hard moments, there's something just really joyful about, I suppose I just feel so honored that there's a human being in the world who thinks I'm his everything. It's such an honor. I mean, when you see just how utterly loving and pure and accepting children are, even in in so-called negative moments, there's still a real sense of joy to be part of it with him, if that makes sense. It sounds a little cliched, but it's actually true. Like, even when things are tough, I'm like, what an amazing relationship to be part of.
Well, talk to me a little bit more about, especially with your work as a therapist, about the idea of like healing your childhood and developmental trauma and your wounds in a way that lets you show up to be the parent you want to be.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if the two are connected, if me being a therapist and me being a parent I suppose that it's allowed me to put
as a
lot
therapist
of
is just that you see a lot of different people. I mean, you see a lot of people dealing with their wounds and their developmental, and you help people work through that. So you just have a lot of, not only your own experience in healing your own wounds, but you have a lot of experience in helping people.
Well, I suppose one of the things I do ask people now that I didn't ask before I had a child is, if they do have children, I'll say to them, what kind of parent are you and what kind of parent do you want to be? In the context of everything that we're talking about in therapy, what is your role as a parent? And that actually, it's a really interesting question for people who are in the middle of therapeutic work that is focusing on them. And quite often I get people to go back to their earliest memories of experiences that they had as a child and to connect with that child as they are now as an adult. And then sometimes they're like, oh my God, I do that to my son all the time, or whatever. Like they start to make these realizations that they have somehow, as much as they feel uncomfortable about it, they have absorbed those parenting techniques or skills or lack of skills into their own way of being. And when they are confronted with it, they go, yeah, that stops now. That stops for me in terms of allowing that to happen to me. And it also stops for my kids.
Yeah.
Because I actually get to choose now. And that's a really, it's a powerful realization. It does heal the child in you as much as the relation, repair the relationship that you have with your own children. It makes me think of I'm sure my friend won't mind me sharing this, but I was doing a workshop and we were talking about, transactional analysis and the adult child parent dynamic. And he was saying, yeah, but what if you're just really angry at your kid? Like, what if they're just pushing your buttons to the point where you can't, like, you're just locked in battle and they won't listen to anything you say? And I was like, can you give me an example? And he said, like, every morning it's a battle with my son. Every morning he won't get his clothes on and he won't eat his breakfast and we're always late and And I'm like, that sounds a lot like the person you describe yourself as. Like, you're Mr. ADHD guy. Like, you're always late. You miss deadlines. People tell you that they're frustrated with you not paying attention. What was it like when you were a kid getting ready for school? And he started to cry. And he's like, yeah, exactly the same. It was exactly the same. And he made a decision then, I'm not going to do this anymore. And he stopped. He got up earlier. He was organized. He changed his behavior. He stopped battling his son and went, I have to model what I want our relationship to be. And from that day forward, he had the lunches ready the night before. He didn't take half an hour messing around in the shower and, modeling the behavior he was hating in his son.
Yeah.
And he reported that, like, that battle stopped. They were showing up to school 15 minutes earlier than usual. They were getting to play in the playground together. His son was putting his arm around him and telling him he loved him. But it wasn't until he realized, oh, I was that kid and I know what that feels like, that he was able to change himself and stop projecting it onto his own kid. He was just being just like his dad. And why wouldn't he be?
Yeah, that stuff gets kind of I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I imagine that stuff gets just ingrained in our subconscious. And until we bring it to our conscious awareness, we just play it out, just like top dog, bottom dog kind of stuff.
He was so used to being in trouble for those things himself and denying that part of himself that it just became second nature that he would get mad at his kid for the same thing.
Yeah, I run an organization here, and I'm really often like trying to get my employees to make up for my kind of like shortcomings, so if like I'm not very type A, or if I'm not very like organized, like I just like, want them to be so organized and make up for all of these like shortcomings. And it's possible that in a workplace that might be okay, maybe unhealthy also, I'm not sure, but I'm certain that in my personal relationships and in my parenting relationships, that's again, that's just like a subconscious thing. I'm denying this part of myself, and it's not part of a designed orchestrated goal for the kind of relationship I'm trying to build, the kind of what I'm trying to help support in my child's development. It's a knee-jerk.
Yes. And what I would say is it's okay to be not good at stuff. So like what I've always said to myself, like my son's dad and I have very different personalities and very different parenting styles. And sometimes those rub against each other. And I kind of had to decide at some stage, do I lock into battle over this? Do I try to assert my will here? And it just didn't feel right to me. Like I didn't want my son to be caught between two people trying to prove who was right. And so I made a very conscious decision that I was not going to engage in conflict over parenting. But what I was going to do is expose Rory to as many people, as varied a group of people as I possibly could. And he will choose who his role models are. So his mom and his dad don't have to be everything. Mm-hmm. I certainly have a lot of shortcomings, mm-hmm. and there are things that I'm really good at, and there are things that I'm just not good at all. But I trust that within my circle of friends and the people that I expose him to and the experiences that I expose him to, he gets to see that there is more than one way to do things. Mm-hmm. There's more than one way to communicate. There's more than one way to express anger. There's more than one way to express love. And he will have a rich enough experience that he will realize that people are different, and he will have an opportunity to get whatever his needs are met, not necessarily by me, not necessarily by his dad. If there are shortcomings, hopefully the community and the clan will pick up the slack. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is kind of like what you're doing at work. You're saying, okay, I'm not good at that bit, so I need somebody else to do that bit.
Yeah, that's a lot of what cooperation and coordination and organizations is about. Yeah, bringing in the different skill sets so that you can do something more than we could do on our own.
Yeah. So, in a way, like gentle parenting or radical parenting or whatever you want to call it is also being allowed to be your imperfect self, mm-hmm. and to be honest about that.
Mm-hmm. And forgiving yourself and
giving yourself, you can skill up where you can. And I read a lot of books, and I check things out, and I ask my friends, am I off base here? Mm-hmm. What do you think? I'm willing to take feedback. But ultimately, good enough is good enough.
Yeah. Well, when I've sat down and thought about what kind of relationship do I want to have with my son, it's honestly really similar to the relationship I want to have with pretty much everyone who's important to me. And if I had to narrow it down to just two things, which I kind of have, the first is what you and I and radical honesty people would call non-withholding or radical honesty, but very similar to what you said when you were first listing what you wanted from Rory. You want him to know that he can be himself with you, no matter whatever's going on for him, whatever's going on in your head, whatever's going on in your body. It's never going to be something you need to hide from me or shift for me to accept you and love you and be there with you as you go through whatever you're going through. I get a little shivers on my face when I think that, but that's the first one for me. And then the second is acceptance. So the first is like non-withholding, just like you get to express everything that's there. And then the second is I have to then agree to not try and change that. I have to agree to just like accept that.
Yeah.
And I want to, when you're, like you said, spouting off or whatever phrase you use that might be something we don't use as often in the US. I don't remember what you said, kicking off or something like that. When he's doing that, like, I don't like my child suffering. I don't like anybody suffering. When you're sad, when you're angry, when you're suffering, I want to end it, and I want to even accept that. I want to accept that, right now you're just mad, and I want to accept whatever's going on. And for me, the hardest, especially in like personal relationships, romantic relationships, it's like I can be there with people being upset. I can be there with people needing to grieve, with people needing to whatever. But when it's directly aimed at me, that's like a Jedi skill I haven't quite mastered. And with your kid, I'm sure it very, very frequently is aimed right at you.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Accepting that anger and that sadness is aimed at you, and in their experience, it's your fault.
Right. There was a period when he was in his, he was about 4, where I've read that young boys go through a period of just like their testosterone just like goes up like 800% when they're about 4, and they're just like these bulls. And I think he there was like a couple of months there where he would tell me I hate you like 80 times before breakfast. And there were times where that cut to the bone, like that hurt beyond, like somebody that you love so much saying that they hate you over and over and over again, and nothing you can do is right. It's painful. And it's not personal. He's not doing it to me. That's where my personal work kicks in. That's where all of the years of meditation, all of the years of practicing radical honesty, all the years of therapy, all the years of learning good conflict resolution skills, all the years of learning how to focus on the behavior and not the person, and being able to separate someone's inherent value from the way things are happening right now kicks in. And also to go and have a good cry and be allowed to feel hurt and sad, but without making it that child's responsibility, without shaming them, without name calling, without stamping down,
without even pulling rank, you know, like you can watch your own boundaries, you can take care of yourself without what I call pulling rank, or what, you know, that phrase, pulling rank on your child.
Yeah, exactly. And you can express your sadness and your frustration while also respecting their inherent value as a human being
and their experience in that moment. Yeah. So yeah, for me, when I'm flipping out, when I'm triggered, I remember just those two things. I narrow it down to just non-withholding and acceptance, because that's all it takes for me to remember these kind of more complex and larger ideas. But yeah, for me, it just boils down to that, because even no matter how triggered I am, no matter how much I think the person I want to be right now is the person who throws a brick through this cab driver's window, I can go back to that and remind myself of, yeah, what I want in all the relationships that I care about is non-withholding and acceptance. You had recommended a couple books. I kind of forget what they were. I think one was Raising Boys, right? Yeah, so maybe I'll put a couple of the books that you mentioned on our list to read and review. Any resources you really want to share around like healing your own trauma? It could be children's related to child raising, or it could be not. Anything you want to recommend to the listeners?
I think some of the best books are actually books that aren't about childhood or child rearing at all. So there's a book that I really, really loved called How to Be Adult in Relationships by, what is his name? Rocha, I think. I can send you information. Do you give links?
Yeah.
Or how do you? Okay.
Yeah.
So How to Be Adult in Relationships is written by a psychotherapist who's also a Buddhist.
Is it David Richo?
Richo, that's it. David Richo.
It's
and
on Audible,
it's a very,
Audible as well.
He talks about the 5 core needs that children have. And that was a really healing book for me, in terms of, you know, he was saying, like, you know, we act out the bits that we didn't get as children, and so it's our job as adults to heal those wounds. And it's a really accessible book, and it's based on some lovely philosophy as well. So I thought that book was really, really helpful to me as a parent. The work of the Gottman Institute, I think, is excellent in terms of teaching good communication skills, and learning how to not engage in passive aggressive stuff. And they have loads of resources. I think they actually do have training for parents.
Yeah, my I don't know what to even call her anymore. My ex and I went to Bringing Baby Home, a workshop that they offer, and followed through their workbook, which is called Bringing Baby Home. And I've also read a few other books of John Gottman and his wife as well. I don't remember her name, but
Yeah. So I really recommend the Gottmans. I think it's really sound. It's evidence-based. There's also a really good book that I read when my son was really young called What Every Parent Needs to Know. And that's based on sort of what we know about like the biology of child development and brain development and the different milestones that young children go through. And it kind of helps explain what it's like from their perspective. And it's very, very short sound bites with lots of pictures. So for parents of new children who are absolutely exhausted and don't have a lot of time to themselves, it's a really helpful book because you can read like 5 sentences and then put it down. So I thought that book was great as well.
Looks like they don't have that on Audible as an audiobook, but it looks like Margot Sunderland is the author.
Yeah.
We'll put links to those as well. Well, anything else you want to share about this topic? I appreciate you talking about this issue of healing your own wounds so that you don't unintentionally get sidetracked or cause wounds that aren't aligned with the relationship you're trying to build with your child and the person you're wanting to be in relationship to your child. Anything else you want to share about that?
I guess I would just say, like, enjoy your kids, enjoy it. It's such a wonderful adventure to see the world through a child's eye, and don't take it too seriously. Even the act of wanting to heal your own wounds, like, don't make that such a preoccupation and mission that you're just analyzing yourself to death instead of getting down on the floor and acting like a crocodile. Because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it is. Crocodiles.
Yeah.
It's non-withholding, acceptance, and crocodiles.
Let your kid teach you how to be that little child again. And that's healing in itself, just to let all the adult stuff go and let them lead.
Yeah. Brad's book, Radical Parenting, and most of these books we're reading, they all have in common just such a high level of respect for our kids. And Brad specifically, all of them, though, talk about these are like little gurus. They have so much to teach you. And so few parents are open and receptive to what there is to learn from your children.
Yeah. And the one person I didn't mention was Sarah Ockwell Smith, who is an English author, and she's written a whole series of books called Gentle Parenting. And she comes from the philosophy that all behavior is a communication. It's just up to you to figure out what it is that they're trying to communicate, and respond in a gentle, loving way, as gentle and loving a way as you can, without losing boundaries. So, kids need boundaries. They need to know what is expected, but how you communicate that should be done in a compassionate and loving way.
Yeah. And another hard lesson for parents, I think, is when you're talking about like every behavior is a communication, recognizing how out of touch most of us are with the communication.
Right.
That it is.
Because we're so wrapped up in the story.
Yeah. And we have so many filters, so many analyses, so many past experience and projections that we don't really know the difference between exploring the communication that is being communicated to us from that thing out there and projecting our own experience, our own situation, which is probably one of the core exercises and muscle building tools of radical honesty.
Yeah. And you practice that with adults. You don't use your kids as guinea pigs for that work.
Right.
But when you do that work with other adults, so you can mess it up and it's safe to do that if you don't feel like you're particularly skilled in that area. Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, thank you. It's nice to see you. I hope we do this again sometime soon.
It was fun. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking me to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of Radical Parenting.